Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis, and here's what matters tonight. About half the state's rest stops are now closed. Auto body shops are probably going to have to lay on extra staff to handle all the pothole damage we'll be getting as the roads continue to deteriorate. Meanwhile, it looked like we had a way to replace the Jordan Bridge without public funds, but the new bridge may not be tall enough for bigger ships that may be coming in a few years. Getting there from here is just one of the issues we'll put to our editorial roundtable tonight. Joining us this week, Daily Press reporter Kimball Payne, and we're also happy to have with us, with his brand new snazzy glasses, Don Luzzatto, the editorial page editor of the Virginian-Pilot. Very Clark Kent, I like it. Also, Vivian Paige joins us. She blogs on the Democratic side of things at vivianpage.com. Brian Kirwin blogs at bearingdrift.com, and he has the Republican perspective. Thanks to all of you for being with us tonight.
Good to be here.
Oh my gosh, since last we met, those 4 items we just read, not to mention the whole 4th of July weekend issue at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, lots to talk about with regard to transportation and where we go from here. We certainly had the 4th of July weekend on Luzzatto was a mess, any way you slice it.
Yeah, it was. We had the HRBT because of a pipe, a little
that
pipe.
Big.
We had a picture of it. It was about the size of a man's hand, and it busted, and water leaked into the bottom of the tunnel, and it held us up for the entire day on July 2nd. So it was a disaster.
The irony from this program's perspective is that we had just recorded an interview with Stephanie Hanshaw from VDOT about hurricane evacuation. And yeah, timing is everything. And he said, boy, you know, we've got a plan for that. It's not a problem. We got a And so we sort of had to run a disclaimer at the start of that show saying, we recorded that, before, but it brings up the question. You know, this was something that Mayor Frame of Norfolk got very worked up about, called an impromptu news conference, said enough is enough.
The interesting part about that was when it shut down the HRBT, it shut down transportation everywhere.
Yes.
You couldn't. It took me 4 hours, I think, to get home that night, or I'm probably exaggerating, but it took me a couple hours because every tunnel, every highway was blocked. It made the entire region a mess, and that's how close to the edge we are all the time.
All the time now, without a B plan.
Well, that's why I kind of laughed when the mayor and some other people were saying this is a funding issue, as if money solves incompetence, and talking about, well, if we had a third crossing, well, third crossing station in Merrimack was backed up all the way to Chesapeake. That would have helped things a lot. You just take people from a tunnel that's blocked to another tunnel that's backed up. There's a lot more issues here than just someone running to raise taxes, someone wanting to build more tunnels. We are kind of fragile. A pipe burst the night before and nobody notices that everything's flooding until the next morning.
And then, to be fair, there was also storm damage that affected the other tunnel.
Right, and a lot of people thought,
but that kind of thing is going to happen.
It is. Yeah. And you got to be alert if you've got a pipe burst. It's got to take you less than half a day to figure out the pipe burst.
True. I mean, I don't really care about the pipe one way or the other. I mean, something like that busting through cement casing. I mean, you're going to have mishaps.
Old
infrastructure. These things are aging. I think what it forces people to recognize is that the thing that makes Hampton Roads great, our water, is also what makes us just tremendously fragile and tremendously expensive to fix transportation. I mean, I don't think anyone claims that this is an easy issue because it's just flat not. It's expensive. It is going to, wherever this goes, wherever any kind of crossing or new development goes, is going to probably take homes. I mean, I'm not talking about a lot of homes, but you're talking about probably taking homes, which is just politically unfeasible to some mayors, to some delegates, with good reason. You don't want to just tear up neighborhoods, but you're talking about something that is a major problem.
The infuriating thing is that we're going backwards now. We've 2 bridges, the Kings Highway Bridge in Suffolk and the Jordan Bridge in between Chesapeake and Norfolk are gone. They don't exist anymore because we could not maintain them, because we didn't have a replacement in place for either one of them.
And the one where the simplest solution is, the Midtown Tunnel, is still just, I mean, that is moving along at a snail's pace. I mean, listen, you want to talk about connecting the light rail through to Portsmouth, sure, that makes sense, but if that's going to cause you to have to go back and do a complete environmental review and raise another $500 million or however much it is for another tube, I mean, every time you get a good idea, by the time you get it to start breaking ground, there's 15 other great ideas that are coming around,
And it
or
just
15 other
takes-
options,
Yep.
and it's
The whole
just,
process.
Well, yeah, and a lot of this is federal regulation. A lot of this is driven. I remember the story how they said, it took 25 years to add one runway to the Atlanta airport, just with all the regulations that's involved in, even through design and environmental, and actually
Right.
getting to the point. Maybe somebody up in Washington could trim that down. Make it doesn't take 18 years to build a bridge tunnel. If we can tighten that up, it could be a cost savings, it could be effectiveness savings.
You mentioned the Jordan Bridge, and that's a very interesting case too, because it is in fact these permitting processes that move along that now have some people in the maritime industry and the Corps of Engineers concerned about the size of this bridge from a vertical perspective.
Well, I mean, the proposal was apparently did not have enough clearance. Although, it's hard to imagine that we need to build a bridge connecting two places that have been connected for 80 years, and we need to build a bridge to accommodate ship traffic that doesn't exist now and probably won't exist for another 10 years. So, and can't be accommodated by the bridges around it. So, I mean, I understand the concerns. It's good to have them, but it shouldn't be enough to derail this bridge.
And this bridge is being built with private
money.
funds.
It's private
because
money.
the city of Chesapeake said, "We cry uncle. We have to shut it down because it's
Yep.
not safe. We
Yep.
don't have the money to rebuild it." What does this say, though, about that concept of, we've talked a lot about this in terms of road construction, in terms of transportation projects, the public-private partnership. It just was curious to me in this whole thing that it's not like you all didn't do a lot of coverage on the Jordan Bridge and what was going on. I know there's official processes, and I get that. But it's just curious to me that nobody picks up the phone in the maritime industry or in the Corps and the Coast Guard and calls the folks in Chesapeake while they're noodling this out, because it was fairly well publicized what they were doing, and says, "Hey, have you thought about this? Just checking, just want to put it on the table. Have you thought this through?" It seems late in the day to be coming to this.
Isn't that
point.
typical, though? I mean, aren't they running into the same thing in Virginia Beach with the height of the buildings? Where they've got a radar that's blocked,
Right.
And they're talking about the fact that the buildings are too tall and that the 31st Street Hotel was built to help block that, and no one ever asked to see whether it was too tall. I think that that's just human nature, that they probably sat back and waited for the actual plans to be put in place and then went, "Oh, these plans don't meet our specifications." Well, they never told anybody up front what the specifications were. And so now we sit here without having a crossing there, and they want to hold it up. And they may very well be able to hold it up. But it certainly doesn't benefit all of us for that bridge to be gone and for us not to have a bridge at all.
Right. And then there's lots of conversation as well about these rest stops that have been closed, and I guess there is no opportunity through the federal government to begin a process to privatize those, as I think a lot of people have suggested.
Didn't they have a bill come up that was that
they're putting a bill into Congress. I mean,
But the timing didn't.
It'll take
I guess it
it'll
didn't come
take
in time for that.
I think the biggest thing I took from the rest stops is the next time a politician wants to tell me that he's ready to make the tough decisions. I mean, Creed Eads and Bob McDonnell immediately rushed out and said, "I'll save the rest stops." Well, thank you, Jesus. You're going to save the rest stops. I mean, listen, no, I'm serious. I think it's a big deal for truckers. I think it's a big deal for people who travel I-81. But in the grand scheme of things,
not
you're going to tell
courageous.
me
Yeah.
that on the laundry list of things we have to do in terms of state government, that the rest stops call for immediate action. Oh, within 90 days, within 60 days.
Exactly.
Are you kidding me?
But they get people's attention. It's like the DMV offices years ago. It's
yeah.
the same sort of thing. It gets
Absolutely.
people's attention.
But it's just
And
a tough decision.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see whether it plays out as a part of the election in the fall. Because
Absolutely.
I'm beginning to think that given what I'm hearing, that it's going to be an abuser fee kind of thing. That it's going to actually play itself out as a part of the conversation for the fall election. And if
So
it
the
does,
closing the rest stops will
yeah,
be vilified as sort of an abuser fee thing?
Well, remember the abuser fees and how
Sure.
they passed through as part of HB
Right.
3202, and the politicians ignored it. They ignored it. And they ignored it for so long, and it just simmered and simmered
Until
and
people started
simmered.
getting tickets.
And then everybody started getting upset
There
about it.
are
And then
no $1,000 tickets getting handed out to somebody
True.
for
True.
reckless driving. That's what drove everybody crazy.
no doubt. There weren't hardly any given
If
out
I
for
don't
the
have a
abuser
place to-
fees either. It was the thought that it would.
But if I'm heading out to Roanoke
But
and
you're
I
a
don't have
guy.
a place to,
But you're a guy.
and I don't have a place to
You're a
pee or
guy.
get a Coke.
can of Coke.
Trees
I love
only
it.
matter for you
I
guys.
love it.
Okay.
Brian, how do you feel about the idea of the possibility of privatizing those rest
And
stops?
this is weird. This is where I get to be nonpartisan. I've got no problem with privatization. In fact, in all these issues, you go from the Jordan Bridge, or
Yeah.
you go to, you find issues of government making things more difficult than they need to be. They're making the Jordan Bridge more expensive than it needs to be. They're making the trouble in Virginia Beach more trouble than it needs to be. They could relocate that radar near Fort Story so it doesn't block anything and everything's fine. But government seems to want to find the more expensive and the more difficult way to accomplish things, and it's frustrating. And the rest stop, I've got no problem with privatizing. I got no problem with generating revenue from them. Apparently there's some federal issues that you need to be allowed to do that, like Maryland does. Maryland's got rest stops that are pretty envious. They're pretty decent economic engines. I'd have no problem with that. I think it's smaller government's better.
But boy, to your point, Kimball, you know, this is that is certainly minor in the scheme of things in terms of where we're going with transportation and in terms of what's on the plate.
Yeah,
And
the thing that links all of this is we don't have any money. There's no money for transportation.
Exactly.
And light rail, I mean not light rail, sorry, high-speed rail.
Yeah, high-speed rail.
Several proposals out there at the moment, none of which.
Several proposals out there. There are 5 that have gone from Richmond to Washington. 5 proposals, and only one of those includes meaningful rail on the south side of the river. So the other 4 involve in some way or fashion expansion of the existing and really decrepit line on the peninsula. But I think what's happened here is that all of these proposals, to a certain degree, want to split the baby, which has been our problem with transportation planning in Hampton Roads. We want to make sure everybody's a little happy and nobody's a lot happy. And I think what's going to end up happening is that we'll end up with nothing.
So you think we'll just kind of dither around with this and then end up with
Well, I
nothing?
think
And then it'll come through Richmond down to Atlanta.
Yeah,
and
Washington
there we
will look
go.
at this and go, well, they can't figure out what they want, so we'll move on. We'll keep going.
Let's be sure what we're talking about. We're not talking about high-speed rail, which is 250-mile-an-hour trains. This is higher speed rail,
thank you.
which is actually lower than high-speed
Which
rail.
is what,
it is,
100
yeah.
and
At
what is
the
it,
most, if it doesn't have
110,
a
something like
stop.
that, yeah.
Actually, and in
It's higher
Virginia,
than low-speed rail.
right? In Virginia Beach, in Virginia business, they
Higher
actually
than the 4th of
in
July
Virginia
at the
business, they
Hampton Roads
actually
Bridge
said the
Tunnel.
rail we're talking about would take you from Richmond to DC in 2 hours. Well, you know, that's drive time. You don't have the congestion, you don't have the traffic, but you know, that's 120 miles in 120 minutes. So. Yes, it's something that's in the conversation, but we're not seeing the bullet trains that they have in other parts of the world.
Speaking of the peninsula, big news this week for those who watch this sort of thing. Mayor Joe Frank saying, "I'm finished, thank you very much. It's been a good run for me." I cannot remember a time when Joe Frank didn't have, you know, some office or some position in Newport News, a real fixture.
Yeah, I honestly thought he came with the peninsula. You know, ever since I've been down there, and you have a lot of really influential people. You mentioned Mayor Frame.
Sure.
I mean, and some of these folks. Joe Frank is one of these unique characters who has been able to. He's built up enough sort of political capital within his own community that he's been able to step out on some issues and say, this may not be the best bargain for Newport News, but this is a bargain for Hampton Roads. And I think you don't see that kind of leadership all the time. And I think you have a lot of people that are scrambling, wondering who is going to be an effective voice for Newport News, because there's no sort of obvious up-and-comer. I mean, at least not that I can think of. I don't pretend to be an expert on Newport News. I'm more of a Hampton guy from time covering Hampton City Hall. But it's one of these cases where a lot of people were saying,
it's a huge void.
really, he's leaving. And I don't know that it's I mean, you're talking about a guy who's getting up near 70 years old. Sure. I think he's 67 now. So, I mean, you know, he's been involved. He's been playing on this level for so long.
Since 1970, I think I introduced him one time, and there's nothing in Newport News from a public service perspective that this guy has not had his hand in. Oh, you did it. The cell phone.
Sorry, I am.
That's
so
all
sorry.
right.
Well,
See?
what I had heard more than anything was, what an odd time to say you're not going to run for re-election next year.
Next spring.
And
It's a May election.
It's a May election.
And that's what caught people off guard. Okay, well, he's leaving, but to announce in July he won't be running for re-election,
So what do you make of that?
Well, my gut tells me there's probably more to the story. And a friend of mine said, well, you know, maybe he wants to go out on his own terms, not do a Myra Obendorf and come up against a defeat and kind of leave undone. You know, you want to go out on your own, and maybe that's he said it's maybe he's saying it's time, and I'm going to go out on my own terms.
I don't have. you know,
but there has been this regional,
Yeah.
you know, that's the issue that's different and significant, I think, on this than it might be if some other mayor said, you know, I won't run for re-election, because where you saw Mayor Frame, you typically saw Mayor Frank. They really worked together on quite a number of initiatives. So it's a moment, isn't it, in the life of the peninsula and the life of the city of Newport News?
Yeah, to me, it sort of highlights the fact that, you know, any sort of regional efforts we have here are almost driven by personalities rather than institutions. We don't really have a mechanism for regional cooperation. We have remarkable leaders who have made it a priority, but, you know, failing that, we don't really have an institution whose job it is to make us work together.
Well, it's really interesting then, because now with Frank leaving, and
he is a personality.
You know, whether Paul Frame sticks around or not, and you've got Will Sessoms, Virginia Beach, you've got other mayors that are relatively new. The baton's going to be passed, and it'd be really interesting. Okay, here's the guys who for decades have set a regional bar, and now they're going to pass the baton.
And
where are they going to take it?
Yeah,
you know, are they going to take it to another level?
Because you've got Mayor Molly Joseph Ward in Hampton.
Or maybe, or is this where it all falls apart?
Really
who
interesting.
knows?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows as well about this governor's race coming up this fall? We know transportation will, well, I say we know. Maybe in this community we think transportation will play a key role in the race, but I don't know about that statewide. What do you think, and what are we hearing?
I don't know that it plays, simply because of the fact that we all know that there's no money.
It may.
I mean, it may be.
They'll have to solve all that congestion on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel.
No, you had to get it in there.
We'd get there sooner or later.
Well, but I think the problem is because we were talking about transportation before, and I said I didn't care what they proposed, because I frankly don't. But you know,
is that because there's no money for it? And
well, it's because it doesn't matter what you propose; it matters what you can get through the General Assembly.
Correct.
None of these guys are one-man bands.
That's right.
And so Creed Deeds has said, I want to call a special session, long-term funding, statewide solution, but he's not.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. But he's not giving any details, which basically means, like, I don't want to come out and tell you I'm going to raise taxes. And Bob McDonnell's running out a 21-page plan that, to me, is warmed over hash, and to me is a lot of stuff that requires federal approval, legislative approval. He wants us to build consensus on the third crossing down here. Well, it's been 15 years. Hasn't worked. So to me, that's a way for him to put something forward, have a lot of places to place the blame when he tosses the folder to the next governor. So neither one of these guys, to me, are exactly stepping up and putting something on the table. But
as long as we have the situation we've got in terms of the General Assembly, they could put all the plans in the world on the table, and it's not going to matter.
Jetpack.
Can you get it through the General Assembly?
Jetpack.
Yeah, but you can't get it through the General Assembly. If you can't get it through...
Well, I don't blame the General Assembly. All you have to do is walk a neighborhood once and say, hi, I want more of your money to build roads. They'll say, I'll sit in traffic.
But you know, this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. This is a rural-urban split. And you know, as the census changes the allocation of seats, it is going to change. We're growing. Northern Virginia is growing.
I know, but you're going to districts.
Bristol isn't.
You'll go to delegate districts that aren't rural, and they're saying, you know, I hate to tell you this, but my paycheck ain't looking that great lately. You want more of it?
Right.
No.
But this
you know, I'll take 20 minutes longer getting home.
Yeah, but a 20-mile backup is hugely different. What happened to us over 4th of July weekend, all it does is illustrate that you may say you're not paying more for transportation.
But you are.
We all paid more for
That's
transportation.
exactly right.
For the third consecutive time, you're going to have a Democrat running for governor who says no tax increases or won't commit to a tax increase and then try to do it afterwards, and they're going to run into the same trouble.
Warner got it through.
Not for transportation. He left transportation in a lurch.
Right,
Not
but
a
he got
penny of that one.
tax increases through.
Yeah,
and he left office with like 60+ approval.
But he didn't campaign on it.
No, nobody
And
does.
he left
They're not
transportation in a
and
lurch.
said the math was wrong coming in.
Right.
Yeah.
And, but
Look at Gilmore.
But for transportation, if it tells you, doesn't it tell you something when candidates, when transportation is not so pressing an issue for the voters to say, I'm willing to pay more in taxes for you to solve this? No, the voters aren't saying that, and the voters will get what they want.
I think the other interesting piece of that is, you know, taxes is certainly one piece of it, but you're talking about a funding source, whatever it is, you know, some sort of clear and dedicated funding source for this. And to me, it comes back to, and she's been on the show a number of times, Senator Von Miller, who chairs the Senate Transportation Committee, and you know, we had this conversation with her a couple weeks ago. She said, look, you can talk all you want to about the plans. The question is, how are you going to pay for it?
Right.
Where's that coming from? And until you answer that question, and until you hold your candidate's feet to the fire on that question. Great ideas, wonderful, wonderful. How are you going to pay for it? That really is, I started to say where the rubber meets the road, but that would be too horrifying of a pun, so I won't. But that's where it gets meaningful.
It's exactly where the problem lies.
Yeah.
We've ignored it for so long. The problem is so big. It takes so much money.
Right.
You know, if we'd started 20 years ago and done something and been a totally different ballgame, we wouldn't be here.
Actually.
But we didn't do what was
going to
necessary.
solve all of our transportation problems into the future.
Yeah, but we didn't do the whole thing that we needed to do, and so that's what gets us here. Now the problem is so large that it would require so many dollars. We're going to have a lot of sacrifices in order to, one way or another, we're going to sacrifice. Whether it's going to be because we're going to sit in traffic,
And I'll tell you
not
what's
get
gonna
through the
happen.
tunnel, not visit the peninsula like I stopped doing, you know, or
There is going to be some high-profile situation where someone is critically injured and can't get to the hospital or can't get where they need to go. There's going to be some sort of tragedy like that where we're going to again come around and talk about it. That's the thing I was thinking about on the 4th of July
And then
weekend.
transportation is such a priority, then we're going to have to stop all the political name-calling and gamesmanship when somebody tries to redirect general fund money into transportation about how it's going to end education as we know it and hurt the children, and you know,
but it
that
will.
doesn't get anywhere. That
But
doesn't
it
get
will,
anywhere.
and we have to talk about the fact that that's a reality.
If you want to spend more money,
So-
you got two choices: get more money from the people who earn it and they don't have it, or reallocate what you get. You know, is there a third way other than McDonald's?
Why does it have to be one or the other? Can
Right.
it be
Well,
both?
or you could do no. It cannot be both. It can be a third way of
Why
finding
not?
economic.
Why could it not?
be both?
Why could it not be
Because
both?
3202 was both.
and look how popular that was.
Well, I'm telling you.
Yeah, but Bob McDonnell signed off
You're
on
not-
that
Yeah,
legally.
I
There you go.
You know-
He said it was good.
Elected representatives don't have people knocking on their office going, "Would you raise my taxes already, please?"
But is there a call, though? Is there a call? You talked about this being a lot of personality. Is there a call for somebody to come and say, look, guys, I got some bad news for you. I'm going to need a little bit more of your paycheck. And we're going to reallocate what we have, recognizing that we have to put ourselves to the same fiscal discipline that you do in your household when you have to cut things out in order to make ends meet. Why couldn't it be both ways?
Let's see somebody run on that.
The pain is just going to get worse. You know that.
Exactly.
I mean, we're going to end up with tolls. If we ever solve this problem, we're going to end up with tolls and we're going to end up with higher taxes. That's really the only meaningful way to solve transportation. The problem is how do you have that conversation when it's not, oh my God, you're going to raise taxes.
And are we going to get to that meaningful kind of conversation in the course of this gubernatorial campaign coming
I
up?
think we need to
3
worry.
months.
No.
We need to worry about Northern Virginia just leaving us in the dust.
Well,
Because
they're-
we get frustrated, but
Yep.
we're not even close to Northern Virginia. And Northern Virginia, you do a redistricting, Northern Virginia gets more delegates. You do a redistricting, Northern Virginia gets more power on the committees, and Northern Virginia is probably tired
and
of
Northern-
Hampton
We've
Roads.
already seen that anyway.
chitter-chatter.
We've already
And
seen
Northern Virginia loved taxes so much when they had a chance to raise their own taxes, they voted no.
But they came back after that defeat and said, let's go ahead and do our own thing
and
here
they're
and start
together.
working
They're
on it.
together
the
on
other
transportation
key is
and we're
they're
not.
very much together. That's why they've managed to get some of those transportation projects through there, which we haven't been able to get
Right.
anything done. That's why our MPO is so poorly run in terms
Metropolitan
of
Planning
our
Organization.
yes. But actually, they're not MPO anymore. What are they called now?
HRTPO,
Okay.
transportation.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh,
Sorry.
that made it easy.
Yeah, that made it more letters for me to remember. But they've been more together, and they've gotten projects done because they as a region, they're operating as a region. We're still fighting amongst ourselves.
We're gonna get a whole lot of phone calls later.
I know you are, and
Yeah,
that
what
was
can I say?
that was Vivian
That was
Page
him.
right
He
there.
was pulling our strings.
Well, thanks to all of you. We're going to have to do this much more often, I can tell. I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. Much has been noted this week about the passing of Walter Cronkite at the age of 92. Later in life, he said he regretted leaving CBS News as early as he did, at the age of 65 or so. I'm confident that CBS regrets that too, since it posted record high ratings while he was at the desk, and today posts record low ratings. To be fair, that probably says more about how the business has changed than it does about who occupies the chair. Walter Cronkite came to Hampton Roads some years ago to speak at the Norfolk Forum. He favored a question and answer format and spoke from a chair because he had just suffered a tennis injury. He was in his 80s at the time. During a lovely chat at the post-speech reception, he asked what I did for a living. And when I told him I worked in public broadcasting, his eyes lit up and he told me all about his local station on Martha's Vineyard. He went on at length about how important is the work we do, because he felt that public broadcasting is a haven for quality journalism in an industry that many of us feel has lost its way. It was a powerful endorsement from a man who shaped an entire industry, bore witness to the American century, and until the very end held us all to a higher standard. We want to hear your thoughts on what we talked about tonight, and again, talk to our panelists about what they said. You can send us an email, which we'll forward to them at whatmatters@whro.org. By the way, you can also become a fan of this broadcast on our Facebook page, and you can write to us at 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk, Virginia, or call 889-9425. Coming up in the weeks ahead on What Matters, building hopes and dreams one house at a time. The area's Habitat for Humanity organizations are not only changing lives for the better, but they're building stronger communities. And it's a simple enough idea. Its impact is enormous. The demand is literally growing for community-supported agriculture. We'll explore the concept and the farmers market industry right here in Hampton Roads. Also coming up, the special story of one of Hampton Roads' most prized locations. Here's a hint, one scoop or two. Conversation with Albert Dumar. I am so excited about this. Can't wait to bring that to you in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, I hope you'll also join us on our News and Public Affairs radio station, 89.5 WHRV, weekdays at noon. Thanks for watching.